Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again, back with more relationship stories. In this video, my entitled siblings have not spoken to me in over a decade and now they come crawling back and demand I give them my house because they are broke. Here is what happened, let's dive right into the video. My home life when I was younger was the definition of dysfunctional. I was the youngest of 3 children and my older siblings were the types that would take things too far to the point where their idea of a harmless prank was akin to abuse. My parents punished them all they could, but my siblings continued their abuse regardless. I remember that when I finally made it to high school, I was so excited because it gave me a set date to move out on after my graduation, just so I could finally go out on my own and not have to deal with my siblings anymore. During my sophomore year, my parents passed away in a car accident. I was devastated. The 2 most important people in my life and my only true support system in my home were gone. However, that did not prepare me for what my siblings did after the funeral. Instead of staying at home to make sure I was taken care of, they were just finishing college at that point, they left the house without even a note to let me know where they went. I tried calling them, tried to visit the school they were both going to at the time, but they avoided me at every turn. I got in touch with an aunt who was also my godmother, and she took me in to help me feel supported. I lived with her for the remainder of my high school years. My senior year, I was awarded a full ride to a college not too far away and was able to finish my education with a bachelor's in finance. I worked all through school, saving up money, so I didn't have to make my aunt work any more than she had to. I can never thank her enough for taking me in, and to this day, I make sure that she's taken care of and make sure to visit her often. I started as a tax preparer and then worked my way up in the company to become one of the district managers for a finance and tax office. With my parents' house being sold back when they passed in order to make sure me and my siblings had the funds to take care of ourselves, I decided that I would actually buy a house myself. It took a few years, but when I was about 5 years out of school, I was able to buy the house and pay off most of it within the first year of having it. Throughout the rest of my high school years, through college and right after college, I had not heard a single thing from my siblings. I figured that they had moved out of state or started families of their own, and to be honest, I was alright with never hearing from them again. I was in a good place in my life and was enjoying my time in my new house when I opened the door to see my siblings on my doorstep. They asked to come in and I let them, a bit confused but wary about why they suddenly showed up unannounced. They took a tour of my house, looking around and commenting about how lovely it was. I thanked them and after a bit decided to ask what the reason for their visit was. They said that they just wanted to see what their new house looked like before moving in. I corrected them, assuming it was a slip of the tongue, that this was my house and that they were just visiting. My siblings went on a bit of a rant telling me about how they had suffered for so many years while at home, and after our parents passed away and it would be the sisterly thing of me to allow them to have my house because it is what family did. I refused bringing up the way they acted when I was younger and how they literally abandoned me when I was still in school. I told them I tried to reach out to them wanting to know what they were doing and if they were okay, but they never saw fit to reach out or visit even when I moved in with my aunt. I had bought this house on my own merit, the deed was in my name. What made him think that I was just gonna give it to them because they asked? My siblings were not happy and got angry at me, claiming I was being selfish and depriving them of the success that I had had. I, according to them, did not understand what they went through during those years, how they felt and how much they were hurting now. I could finally be a part of their lives again, but I was too selfish and would not give them my home. I kicked them out of my house and thought that would be the end of it. Instead, for the next month, I would get my siblings appearing at my door unannounced, trying to convince my neighbors that I was depriving them of a home and parking outside of my home to watch my house while I was out at work. I made sure my neighbors knew of the situation and the cops were called a few times on my siblings who left before they could be arrested. Then I got a call from my aunt letting me know that my siblings reached out to her and told her a far-fetched story about how I had promised them my new house. I told her about what had happened and she let me know she would spread the word to the rest of my family just in case my siblings tried to reach out to someone else. My siblings continued to harass me through the next month. I was seeing posts on my social media about how I was a horrible person, lies about how I was embezzling from my company and didn't deserve any of the money I'd gotten. And even had to meet with one of the higher executives because one of my siblings called my work to report that I was writing fraudulent checks. The tipping point came when I received a formally written letter from them threatening legal action if I didn't give up my home. I took the letter and grabbed a folder. The next week had me printing out screenshots of social media posts, emails, text messages, and other electronic evidence that they were harassing me. I was able to get the phone call my boss received documented, along with all of the police reports my neighbors filed when they saw my siblings outside of my home. I even had my aunt find a family member that didn't answer my siblings' call, send over the recording of the voicemail they left. Once I had everything together, I got a lawyer to make sure what I had gathered was enough. My lawyer was impressed with what I had managed to collect, since it would be a very simple case if I wanted to go to trial. I had thought about it, since it would be a fitting way for my siblings to be confronted with their harassment, but I knew something like that would take too long. Instead, I settled on a more direct approach, one that was still within my legal rights and would make sure that everyone knew just what they were like. I planned a housewarming party and invited as many people as I could. Neighbors, co-workers, and my extended family. I extended the invitation to my siblings and, just as I expected, they were on their best behavior during the party. After a few hours of eating and relaxing, I gathered everyone up and admitted I had an ulterior motive for the party. I could see my siblings' eyes gleaming, most likely thinking I was gonna announce that I was giving them the house. Instead though, I pulled out my file of evidence and told everyone how I had been harassed over the past few weeks by my siblings. For some people, especially members of my family, this came as a shock. Some of my neighbors were surprised, since many of them had been the ones to call the police on my siblings for loitering outside my home. My co-workers were especially floored once they heard the phone call that my boss had received about me. My siblings looked like they wanted to melt into the floor. I told everyone about how I'd been treated by them for the entirety of my life, how I was abandoned by them after my parents' deaths, and how they thought they were entitled to my home just because I was successful and thriving. They left in a hurry, and to this day, I have not heard a single word from them. Now I can finally live in my home without fear or worry of repercussions. And the next one is an Am I the A-hole story titled, Am I the jerk for banning my husband and father-in-law from the delivery room due to their intensely stressful and creepy behavior during my pregnancy? And by the way, if you haven't already, I would very much appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of my daily content. Either way, lots of context, the character limit cuts off, but here's the gist. My husband and I are expecting our first child, which I knew would be a really sensitive issue as his own mother died in childbirth with him. We met with a marriage counselor to talk things through at the beginning, and he swears he's been seeing his own therapist twice a month throughout my pregnancy. I don't want to call him a liar, but I'm fairly sure he's either not going or not talking about the big issue. He and his father, a hugely active part of our lives, are completely convinced that I'm gonna die in childbirth. They won't openly admit it, but their behavior has reached a point where it's constantly making me feel stressed and uncomfortable. When it was husband saying, "Please make sure your life insurance is up to date," and "I would like you to meet with a lawyer and draft a will," I was like, that's kinda intense, but okay if that makes you feel better. When my husband asked me to go through all of my possessions and inventory, what I wanted to be saved for the baby, versus what I would want to be returned to my family in the event of my death, I put my foot down and said absolutely not, too morbid, no way. My father-in-law, who lives a few blocks away and eats dinner with us 2 to 4 nights a week, got on my case about how I was making things difficult for my husband in the event that he'll be a grieving widower with a newborn. I'm just gonna add here that I've had a completely complication-free pregnancy and have no reason to think that I'll die screaming in the coming weeks. When I tell my husband this, he calls me paranoid, but I feel like my father-in-law wants me to die. His whole life identity for the past 35 years has been amazing single dad, never dated or had close friends or even hobbies really, and it seems like he's looking forward to being able to guide my husband through what he went through. At this point, I'd honestly be happy to never see my father-in-law again, and I certainly don't want him in the delivery room, especially since he told me he was putting his foot down about me not being allowed to have an epidural or laughing gas. He is a commanding presence, and I know that whatever he wants in the delivery room, he will get. I know people would say, "Oh, L&D nurses would never let it happen," but you haven't met this man. My husband, in addition to backing his dad on everything, acts like my due date is my death date and has completely pulled away from me. Every minute with him is morbid, stressful, and a reminder that our marriage seems to be crumbling. No matter how many times I tell him his behavior makes me stressed and upset, it's just getting worse and I don't want it around me while I'm concentrating on giving birth. Do I owe it to my husband to let him stress and upset me during labor? And yeah, ripe stars, let me know what you think about this story in the comments. What would you do if you were in OP's shoes. And I definitely have to agree with OP that this is super creepy and weird. I mean, I think we've talked about this in the past on a different story, that apparently some people are really concerned about dying, and apparently it's not super unusual for them to draft a will, even when they are still super young and healthy. However, I gotta say, the way OP's husband acts is definitely not normal, and it would also creep me out. Let me know about your opinion in the comments. OP further said, is his presence at the birth more important than a safe and healthy delivery? My therapist says no, but this whole thing has been so weird, I feel like I need some outside perspective. Update, this is a long overdue update. I know I worried everyone and I'm grateful every day for every ounce of concern that was sent my way. To get right into it, I was unfortunately right about my suspicion that my ex was not going to therapy. I sat down with him and very firmly put my foot down about my mother being my support person in the delivery room alongside him, and that my, thankfully, ex-FIL was not to be anywhere near the delivery room. I also was very adamant that I was getting an epidural, and ex-father-in-law had no say about any medical procedures I may take. I also told him that I was seeking my own therapist, as his and his father's actions were worrying me. My ex-husband didn't take it well, to put it simply. I had never heard him shout at me like that, and it scared me a little. My fury outweighed my fear not long after, however. He told me I did not need a therapist, that he was just trying to be prepared. I admittedly lost my temper and told him that I was not gonna die. It was not my fault his father's trauma wormed its way into his head, and that he needed to fix it without taking it out on me. He yelled at me that he did not need therapy. That caught me a little off guard. I asked him why he went to his therapist and was given advice about my death if he felt he didn't need it. His expression gave it away and he caved not long after. It turns out there was no therapist, it was just his dad. During the times he was supposed to be at therapy, he was with his dad. I'm still fuming. In the end, I gave him a choice. He could either go to therapy or I was leaving. I had enough of their delusions. He chose to refuse therapy and I packed my things and stayed with my mother. At that point, I still was not planning on divorce. I had hoped that we could possibly fix our marriage, as naive as it sounds, but my ex decided that if he could not convince me to come back, then he would get his father and the rest of his family to do it. I had to change my number due to the amount of harassment and vitriol they hurled at me. In the end, it was just my mother in the delivery room as I gave birth. I'm actually thankful for the nursing staff, they were a godsend, and I felt safe that neither my ex or his father would get even remotely close to the room without my say-so. The divorce is still ongoing, so I can't give too many details on that front, but I have hopes that we can work out a tentative co-parenting agreement. To be clear, my ex is not a bad father, he loves our baby girl, but our relationship is done. As long as I live, ex-FIL will never be near my daughter. I'll wrap this up. I've got an adorable little toddler tugging at my leg at the moment. I'm alive, I'm happy, and I've got my baby in my arms. Life is good. And here, ripe stars, props to OP. I think she did the right thing here, and that father-in-law was truly creepy, and there was definitely something wrong there, no doubt about that. Either way, if you would have been in this situation, let me know what you would have done. The next one is a petty revenge story. The backstory is that I have an annoying cousin Louise, aka Poo-Covered Lou, who's heavily into competitive child raising and off-roading her four-wheel drive in my front garden. That's, by the way, a very interesting hobby to have. She is no longer allowed on our property. I don't speak directly to Lou anymore, but I do speak to her mom, Auntie Dot, and my fiance Martin is friends with Lou's husband Mike. I don't work on Thursdays, so I was still getting dressed when I heard a car and some voices. My cat sprinted off the bed and hid in the bathroom about a nanosecond before my cousin's Wonder Kids, 8 male and 6 female, burst in. I got no idea why they weren't at school. My fiance was just behind them looking a bit panicked, very unusual state for him. Apparently Louise had to take Auntie Dot to the hospital and urgently needed someone to look after the kids. Martin, being the compassionate soul that he is, agreed. So we spent the morning looking after the Wonder Kids and our own Vampira, nearly 2 female, and she wants to gnaw your broccoli. Just after lunch, healthy and nutritious, Martin tried ringing Lou to get a progress report. No answer though, no biggie, they were in a hospital. But he thought he'd try ringing Lou's husband Mike to see if he had heard anything, and it turned out Mike had no idea the kids were with us, they were supposed to be with his mom. The hospital visit was an outpatient clinic for Louise, not an urgent trip for Auntie Dot as implied. Auntie Dot was there for moral support. Mike offered to come and collect the Wonder Kids, but since he is self-employed and was working on a site about 2 hours away, we agreed to keep the Wonder Kids for the rest of the day. Mike rang back and said Louise would collect the kids at 5 p.m. I was fuming. Poo-covered Lou had lied and taken advantage and managed to worm her way back in. So I decided to play dirty. Literally, I took the Wonder Kids for a walk to the park while Martin took our youngest to do some shopping. It was a nice winter's day and the kids ran around, fell over, climbed on all the play equipment, jumped in all the muddy puddles and found a heap of treasures and put them in their pockets to show their mom. We did wash the faces and hands afterwards and clean shoes as best we could, but Lou had not provided a change of clothing. So by the time she arrived at 6 p.m, on time for her, the Wonder Kids were tired, happy, hungry, and absolutely filthy and keen to show off their treasures. Louise, on the other hand, was not happy and made the Wonder Kids leave their treasures on the nature strip, dirtying their hands again, and then when the kids were strapped into their car seats, it was time to enact the final part of my petty revenge. Martin produced the shopping I'd asked him to get and gave them a paper bag each. I explained they were a little treat for the journey home to tide them over. Inside each bag was a sweet bun known in our house as instant diabetes. They are filled with strawberry jam, iced with gooey pink icing, and liberally dusted with desiccated coconut. According to my dad, by the time they reached home, the Wonder Kids were covered in jam and icing as well as dirt and they didn't want dinner. My kids ate their veggies, Lou. The backseat of Lou's car was also covered in dirty, sticky fingerprints and coconut. Apparently Lou's not happy and even though she is vacuumed, she is still finding little shreds of coconut in the backseat. And oh dearie me, so sad, we are never allowed to look after her kids ever again. Ever. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. The next one is titled, Don't Throw Food at Me. So, I was a low-level manager at a restaurant. I was friends with all the servers. I worked my way up. The rest of the managers were mostly brought in. I would work my butt off to help them. I would clean tables, comp tickets even when it is my lunch, refill drinks if they were in the weeds, etc. We are in this together. These are my people. I was getting married. Majority of my guests and bridesmaids are my co-workers. I got my dress at Rhymes with Mavid's bridal. My mom was not there for the dress shopping. She lived 5 states away. That weekend we were going back for the fitting and I was super excited to show my mom my wedding dress and veil. Lady then comes in to pick up her to-go order, chicken fingers and fries. They had just been made piping hot, no problems or exceptions to the order. She is wearing a branded bridal polo. She comes back 2 minutes later and claims the order is cold, we used cold fries, etc. I watched them make the order. She must have opened the box in the car. There is no way it is cold. But okay, we will make you another. I get the kitchen to drop the new tenders and fries. The general manager goes to comp the meal. We always go over the top for customer service. Lady then claims the to-go girl was rude to her. I was there. She did not do anything out of turn. She does not care too much about fighting over chicken fingers. She said, "Okay, let me get a manager. We are so sorry." Somehow, in the 8 minutes to turn the order around, Lady is even more upset. Manager tries to give her a card for another free chicken finger meal next time she comes in. Order comes up. We give the new hot order to the now yelling lady. She is mad because the to-go girl was not punished enough in front of her. I guess the GM was supposed to humiliate my friend in front of everyone. And by the way, Ripe Stars, just to quickly chime in, how much of a POS do you have to be to demand that an employee gets humiliated at work in front of everyone? Anyway, he said he will take care of the discipline problem. He won't, but he apologizes again. She opens her bag of food, opens the box, and hurls it. The sauce spills all over my friend's shirt and she has hot fries and chicken fingers thrown in her face. The lady stomps out. I ask my boss to make a call after we all share the "Damn, she is crazy." He is confused. I've never asked to use my cell on the floor, but he goes along with it. I call Mavid's bridal and then tell them I was a guest at a restaurant and their employee just dumped food and yelled obscenities while in uniform representing their company. Furthermore, I was a bride coming in for a fitting this weekend. I describe the lady and say I don't want her anywhere near my appointment. On top of being crazy unprofessional, I have people coming in from out of town. It's a special time for me. I don't want her vibe to ruin it. Manager there promises she won't be and is appalled. I've never called anyone else out for bad behavior while in uniform, but my GM thought this was awesome. And I was totally rocking a petty revenge lady French fry in the pants. Update: I did in fact go back many times. Bridesmaids and additional fittings, shoes, everything wedding related. I stopped seeing that lady sometime through these appointments. I did not notice at first when, but suddenly months had gone by and her face was no longer there. So she probably did get fired, likely not the first incident or unprofessional behavior she displayed. And yeah, ripe stars, I mean, in the first place, it is never a good idea to be an ass to people, especially at work. However, when you make a scene like that, maybe you should make sure that you are not representing your company, aka wearing a company uniform. And the last one is titled, Pay your workers less so I don't have to pay more. Background info: I work for a luxury florist shop in the US and our flower prices are not cheap. We have a high minimum dollar amount for delivery. Most local florists have a minimum plus delivery fee. Our fees have stayed the same since the pandemic, but we have upped most of our arrangements by $5 to $10 to help cover some losses. Our prices are high, but we specialize in very full and/or large arrangements to make up for it. This is a conversation I had with an entitled woman. Me, just letting you know, all our arrangements start at $75. The total after tax and delivery for the product you have chosen comes up to about $105. Karen: What? That is ridiculous. You charge that much? Me: Yes. Would you like to proceed? Karen: That is crazy. Why? Me: The owners felt this was the best way to ensure great quality products and a fair living wage for our employees, especially during these times. Karen: Well, we've all got issues going on right now. That's not an excuse. Some of us are unemployed. You should not be increasing the prices at our expense. You should internally have a meeting and take the wages out of the owners and employees so we don't have to pay so much for your ridiculously expensive flowers. You cannot do this at the customer's expense. Tell the owners. Me: Ma'am, it seems like we may not be the right fit for you and are unable to give you the experience you deserve. Would you like me to refer you to another florist? Karen: Oh no, let's just finish this order, but you've lost me as a future customer. Me, thinking, oh no. Me, actually, thank you for your purchase and we are sorry to lose you. Enjoy the rest of the day. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you again tomorrow.